Thank you so much, sir.
Well, hello everyone and welcome. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good night. I know for some of you this is either very early or very late, or maybe both at the same time. So thank you so much for being here. And just so that you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record this session so that it can be shared in the future. So I hope that's okay with everyone.
Recording in progress.
So this is a wonderful opportunity for us, and I'm just so excited and honored to be here with all of you for the online and virtual edition of the Leonardo da Vinci Choral Festival for this year. So, of course, heartfelt thank you to Leonardo Saglioca for the invitation to present. I'm very excited to speak with all of you and talk about something that I think is very important, especially right now during this pandemic time with this worldwide health crisis. So one of the things that we understand is that everyone around the world is handling this differently because this health crisis is impacting different parts of the world very differently. So I know, for example, where I live in Los Angeles, we have had no in-person rehearsals, we have had no social interaction, but in other parts of the United States, they have been able to do this. And so this has been a challenge. My hope today is that I can present some ideas to you, some things that I think maybe you already understand, but more importantly, that might remind us of some of the more valuable concepts or aspects of what we do as choir conductors. So that's my hope at any rate. Okay, so as we're thinking about, what it is that we do and why we do it, we want to kind of be aware that our singers, they come to us from all different types of experiences, different expectations. And when we are presenting not just the choir season, but as we're approaching every single individual rehearsal, it's our responsibility, I think, to make sure that the singers stay engaged, not only for the musical excellence, but also for the community. So we have a US conductor who passed away back in 2015. Her name is Helen Kemp, and she had this great expression: body, mind, spirit, voice. It takes the whole person to sing and rejoice. Now, for sure, Helen Kemp was a hard worker, and she demanded the very best from her singers. But at the same time, she was aware that there was the individual needs, there were emotions, there was the community connection that was also very important for everyone. And so it wasn't just about the music or about singing correct notes, it was also about elevating and engaging the individuals. So we have this saying here in the United States that when I teach conducting to my students, I tell them technique without passion can be very boring. However, passion without technique can be embarrassing. So we want to be sure that when we are working as conductor, we are not leaning too far only into the technical aspects, but also not leaning too far relying on passion and emotion only. We want to have a nice balance of both of these concepts when we're working with our choirs, when we're preparing our rehearsals. That goes for online rehearsals as well as in-person rehearsals. So something that I'm very fond of and I talk about a lot when I travel around is how we fill in the margins for our singers, for our audiences, and for our communities. So this is a page of a book that I happen to love. It's by the author of The Lord of the Rings. And what I've done is I've filled in the margins with all of these notes that help me interact with the text, things that help me to understand what the author is trying to say. And in this way, when I have a conversation with the author, I feel more engaged. I feel like the text really has meaning for me. Well, in a very similar way, this is exactly what we do when we are preparing a score. We are filling in the margins for our singers. So this is the opening of the Mozart Requiem, and you see that I filled in the margins with all of these notes. We have notes on text and translation, harmonic function. We see we have all these different types of notes about harmony and form. I've made a lot of notes to myself so that as I'm conducting, which instrument, which part is coming in. Well, I'm doing this so that I can fill in the margins for the singers, so they know what it is that I'm trying to achieve, what we think Mozart was trying to say. But when we do that, we also fill in the margins for our audiences, and their understanding is also increased. And this can be a very powerful thing. So now, as we're talking about filling the margins, we have to remind ourselves that the concept of filling the margins is not only about what we want. It's trying to keep a mind and heart into what we think the singers also need to be happy, to be satisfied, to become better. And then also what we think the audience will appreciate. These are very important and sometimes can be challenging. So now, when we're thinking about working with our choirs, sometimes we also have to remember when we fill in the margins for some, we want to be careful not to ignore or forget others. So this is a very important picture. This was taken back in 2012, and this was at a choir competition. Schedule was very tight, and the conductor was very nervous. So he rushed his choir onto stage, and because there was a time limit, he didn't wait for his one student in the wheelchair to join them, and he performed without this student. So even though he was working so hard to follow the rules and create the experience for most of his singers, he forgot about one singer. And so this is actually a real picture from the United States back in 2012, and it breaks my heart every time that I see it. Okay, so we're in this really strange time right now. The pandemic has caused so many challenges that perhaps you've experienced that I have not. One of the challenges, though, is how much time we're actually spending on computers or cell phones or iPads, just like right now. So around the world, and this is taken from several surveys, the average person this past year spent about 35 hours a week on Zoom or video calls, or doing some kind of work on a computer screen. They spent an additional 2.5 hours on social media, right? So I don't know, like TikTok, Instagram, whatever. But then beyond that, they spent another 2.5 hours, this is every single day, watching television programs or movies. That is a lot of time on computer screens that we didn't have to deal with before. And this brings us to, the idea that maybe we're having fatigue, with our eyesight, with our brain capacity, with our physicality. Are we sitting up straight anymore? Are we just kind of hunching over because we're watching TV so much? I think this is a real challenge that we have to remember as conductors where our singers are coming from. Now, this is interesting. A recent study told that people nowadays, they're very different than they were even 30 years ago. And so soundbite refers to something that you might hear on the radio or television. And then of course retention is the things that we understand and are able to hold on to. Well, what they're saying is this study was great. It's called The Incredible Shrinking Soundbite. And they said that back in, let's say in the 1980s, the average length of a soundbite was about 43 seconds long. That's a really long time, 43 seconds. But compared to today, the average soundbite is only 8 seconds. 8. Which means we're used to things happening very fast. If it's movies, if it's television, even when we're talking to each other, we have to talk very fast. So people are used to this. Now, the problem here is that what we do in choral music is not fast. In fact, this is something in direct contrast to what we do as music educators, as conductors with our singers. We usually take time to explain concepts. We take time to rehearse. So we have the video challenge, too much screen time, plus the sound that attention spans are shrinking. And you see that the job of a conductor can be very challenging right now. So to put it another way, in normal times, I like that picture of the child sleeping in his chair. But in normal times, you see a 5-year-old has an attention span of about 8 minutes, 10-year-old maybe 20 minutes, and adults, they have an attention span of up to about 30 minutes in normal times. Now, according to recent surveys, the attention span on Zoom, before you look at a cell phone, look at the computer screen, do something else, is only about 12 or 8 seconds. We are very used to moving and changing gears very quickly, checking our cell phone text messages, looking at email, looking at video. So we have to remember this, that our singers are just living a different kind of life than I think even I was as a young child. So the expectations have changed. Now we remember also that this is such a hard time for conductors. It's so many challenges, and there are disadvantages to trying to teach online. So for instance, student feedback is limited. Like right now, all of you are watching me, but you don't have the opportunity to like raise your hand and ask a question in the same way if it was in person. We're all isolated. Sometimes it's hard to become motivated to do another video class, another video rehearsal. We are not developing our communication skills in the same way. So much of everything that we do on video is theoretical, not necessarily practical. And then last but not least, this one right here, access and availability. Not everyone has the same level of access to technology. So these are some of the challenges that our singers have, and sometimes they don't tell us, but they're struggling nonetheless. And then finally, we want to remember that we have different types of learners in our ensembles. Everyone learns differently. I happen to be a very physical, very verbal kind of a learner. I like to move around. I like to talk and ask questions. But some singers aren't like that. Some singers, they learn through seeing. Other singers, they learn through interacting with their peers, with their fellow singers. They're different types of learners, and so finding innovative ways to do that via Zoom, by using like a chalkboard, using video examples, this is something that we all have to do. Now, I want to share something with you from this last year that I was able to do with my choir. So we know that Zoom rehearsals are very challenging because sometimes everyone is muted and you can only hear the conductor talking or practicing. Well, this last year I was very fortunate. We were able to use a new technology called Jack Trip. And this allowed all the singers to sing together on Zoom with no delay. And the sound quality was okay. So I want to play a short video clip for you so you can hear what I'm talking about.
Altos crescendo.
So I don't know if you could get a sense of this, but that was all of the singers singing together at the same time in their individual homes. But this was actually of some distance of, more than 1,000 kilometers. So very far away from each other and able to do this. So for my choirs, this helped tremendously because the singers were allowed to hear each other's voices and they could begin to blend and balance with one another. And yet, there were still some of the other challenges that I talked about earlier about online learning. They were still in isolation. They still couldn't have that immediate interaction with each other. And they were still confined to, not a perfect audio representation of what they heard around them. So there was still challenges, absolutely. So again, we have all these challenges, but some things remain the same. And this next section of my talk is just a reminder for what we can do as conductors, what we should do to make sure that we are providing the singers not just the best experience, but a productive experience, so that there's always some level of learning. So for example, I know that I really love to be happy. I love it when my singers are happy. And so in rehearsal, I like to have a good time, right? Maybe people can laugh sometimes. This is great. But in a core rehearsal, we understand that's not always the most important thing. Sometimes in rehearsal, we have to make progress. So whether it's online or in person, some things, again, stay the same. So my teacher, and when I was in school, he was very fond of saying, to achieve the best results in the least amount of time with the least amount of vocal strain. And his idea, this was what choir rehearsal was for. Best results, least amount of time, least amount of vocal strain. So we want to move. We don't want to keep repeating ourselves. We don't want to, force our singers to fall asleep because we're not making any progress. We want to keep moving. Okay, so what are some prerequisites? Well, first of all, as a conductor, you must know what you want. Now, I was watching these videos from the competition, and I was so impressed with all of the choirs, because it felt to me like the conductors, they knew what they wanted from the very beginning of the rehearsal process. It was great. Next, as a conductor, you must be able to explain. Sometimes it's not enough for a conductor, just to say, no, do it again. You have to be able to explain technically, but also maybe with some other examples. And then finally, you must be able to demonstrate. This is very important for us as singers or as conductors. So if we want the singers to do a crescendo, we should be able to sing a crescendo for them so they can hear exactly what we want. Now, this comes back to my overriding philosophy and approach to the rehearsal process. And this is something that I've used my entire career, and I keep trying to improve as I get older. So now, this first part of the rehearsal process at the top, this is very common, I think. I think all conductors do something like this. You present a section, you go in and you fix, and then you put it all back together again, right? That's kind of like the traditional way that we rehearse, okay? But it's this section right here, antithesis, where I think some of the very best work can be done. And if you follow this arrow down, what this does is it requires a very specific, prescribed approach to fixing problems or to educating our singers. So the first thing is we open a set. So this is like, okay, sopranos, make sure the F sharp is higher, right? So then follow through. We have them do it. They sing, and then finally we respond and we say, yes, very good, or no, that was horrible. But the idea here is that it's very important that we respond. Many conductors will say, no, sopranos, the F sharp needs to be higher, and they stop there. I think good conductors will tell them the problem, but then they'll also make them follow through. But the best conductors will then respond. Now, here's the trick. If your response, if the choir doesn't do it right, then we have to help them. We have to teach them. Oh, sopranos, F sharp is the leading tone to G. Da da. Or, can you take your hands and when you sing the F sharp, can you lift your hands this way? Da da. So they can feel. So we're using a physical. And in this way, we can help teach them so that the next time we have them do the set and then follow through, hopefully our response is yes. Again, we're trying to help them learn so that we can move on to the next challenge. We don't want to keep doing this over and over and over again. So put another way, again, the best conductors, they don't just hear problems or point out problems. They have the choir do it, and then they're able to respond accurately. Is it correct? Is it wrong? Because if it's wrong, then as conductors, our job is to then teach, not to just demand, do it again, no, do it again, no. We actually have to teach them, okay, here's why I think you're doing it wrong, or here's how you could do it better. This is our job, and this is a critical point that I think sometimes conductors may forget because we have so much pressure with the upcoming competition or festival. Okay, now let me shift very quickly. I'm trying to get through all this information. How many of you have ever heard of the Fibonacci sequence? No? That's okay, that's okay. So the Fibonacci sequence is this mathematical occurrence that happens in nature. It happens naturally. And so you'll see here up at the top, this sequence of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. You start to understand the sequence, right? 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, so on and so forth. So now again, this happens in nature. Here's an example. That is an example of the Fibonacci sequence realized in our natural world. And you see that there's a gradual expansion and growth that looks very organic. We see that with flowers. We see that with the vibrations of the planets. The Fibonacci sequence is all around us. So what I have done, and there was a teacher a long time ago who brought this concept to me. It was because the Fibonacci sequence follows more rules of natural world, of more of nature, organic nature, then it feels right when we see it. Like, this just looks pleasing. It looks really nice, doesn't it? Well, the same concept can be placed onto our rehearsal process, so that the rehearsal learning process unfolds naturally, so that the first thing we do, is not Verdi Requiem, right? Bah! From the first minute, but we slowly grow into the rehearsal minute by minute. So what I've done is here, and as an example, in a 1-hour rehearsal, I would break this down. The first half would be 32 minutes. You'd have a break, and then the last half would only be 19 minutes. And you see I've broken it down by the Fibonacci sequence. 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 5, 8. Okay, now, you're probably thinking, okay, well, I'm not quite sure that I still quite understand. Well, let's look at it this way. In 1 hour, the first minute, welcome and greeting. Hi everyone, it's great to see you. Hurry, hurry, come take your seats. We have a lot to do today, right? Then 2 minutes, we have announcements, and maybe we talk about what we're going to rehearse that day. 3 minutes, physical stretching. 5 minutes of vocalization. 8 minutes of a song that's easy or that they already know. And then the largest portion of the rehearsal on a new or difficult song. 13 minutes, right? Now, then we break. Then when we come back, we start the Fibonacci sequence over again. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And what you'll find is that we create for the singers, again, a feeling of a natural progression through the rehearsal process. But at the same time, we don't spend the entire hour on one song. We allow our singers to be intellectually engaged. We allow our singers to feel like there's progress every rehearsal. And you notice that something that I did you notice that the first half is always longer than the second half. This is important. Even in a 3-hour rehearsal, maybe the first hour is a full 90 minutes, but the second half maybe is only 65 minutes. This helps singers psychologically. They feel less weight if we do this for them. Again, dealing with group management, group dynamics is very important. And so this is one way of doing it. So I hope this kind of makes sense. Now, this is the process that I will use at the beginning of the rehearsal process. So if we have like 2 months of rehearsals, this is how I start. But as we get closer to the performance, this changes, of course, because we have different priorities. So I don't use this the entire time. I hope this makes sense a little bit and maybe provides you with some ideas of how you might prepare or begin the rehearsal process on a new song. Okay, so these are some ideas. Again, this is from my former teacher, and there were 3. He created these list of 12 ideas, but these are 3 that I think are very important that I'd like to give to you. So the first one, as conductors, you must know and love the score with all your heart, mind, and soul. And what he says is the best way to do this is not from recordings, not from YouTube, but it comes with you sitting down with the music and just studying it. Studying the form, the text, singing through each part so you know the rhythm, so you know the pitch intervals. If you can learn the song from inside out, this is the best. Again, eventually, YouTube, that's okay, but that's not how you want to learn a song. You want to learn a song for yourself. Okay, second, do not create problems. This is hard sometimes for conductors because we know maybe how difficult a song can be. What we don't want to do is create challenges for our singers that don't exist. So something that I've heard a lot of conductors will say in rehearsal, say, okay, everybody, this song is really hard. I hope you can do it. And it just kills me when I hear that. Because there's a concept for teachers that says singers can learn if the teacher can teach. So we don't have to create problems. We don't have to undermine their confidence. The idea is to, if problems happen, fix it. Don't worry about it before it happens. And then finally, this is important, make music at least once every rehearsal. And by making music, I'm talking about the artistry, the beauty. We want to make sure that at least once every rehearsal, we're doing something that feeds them, feeds their emotions, feeds their soul, so that it's not always just hard work. I was watching some of these recordings for the competition, and I was amazed because the music was so complicated, and yet the performance was so beautiful. That's amazing to me. I love that because sometimes if music is complicated, we can spend too much time on all the technical details. So I was very happy to see these recordings. And then this is the very last slide. I think we must never forget that as conductors, our most valuable resources is not money, is not food. Our most valuable resources as conductors are the people in our choir and their time. Again, let me say it again. It's our people, not us, and their time, not our time. So we want to respect the singers in our choir, and we want to respect their time. So if I spend an entire rehearsal repeating the same 8 measures, that doesn't feel respectful of their time. That doesn't feel like I'm educating, that I'm helping them to learn. It just feels like I'm, putting a hammer to a nail. We want to be respectful of our people and their time. So as we prepare rehearsals, as we select repertoire, as we interact with them, we are engaging with them as human beings. And we're trying to not just learn music, but we're trying to empower them. We want them to be successful. And the more we empower them to have agency or control over the process, then I think the more successful we will be and the more enjoyable the process will be for the singers. So that was a very quick presentation and walk through some concepts that I think are important, not just now during pandemic, but all the time. And I hope some of these concepts were helpful and beneficial for you. Now, we have a little time left. Does anybody have a question or any thoughts they'd like to share, maybe about their own conductors or their own experiences with their choir? I'd be happy to answer questions. I have to remind myself that especially Indonesian conductors, they're very, very polite.
Hey, Mr. TJ Harper.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, my name is Arga. I'm from Indonesia, PSS Warawadana. I have some question. In case the choir is singing and someone is make mistake when they during they singing, so would you prefer to do calling the person or just repeat and teach one section, for example soprano, or you prefer to calling the name of the person that have made mistake?
Wow, it's such an important question. Arga, really, thank you so much. So there are a couple answers to this. First, we have to remember, okay, what type of choir? So I have many choirs, and some of the choirs are community, just for fun. And so the singers, they don't read music. They just, they want to be with their friends. So if I say, Arga, that was wrong, do it again, that person will probably quit, right?
Yeah.
But if it's, let's say, a more advanced ensemble, maybe with auditions, I think there's a way to call out an individual, but still be respectful. Like, oh, Arga, I think it was a little flat. Try and sing it with a little more, intonation or breath support next time, okay? So you can still be respectful, but I think in the advanced choirs, singers, they actually like when a conductor can be specific. So that's one answer. I think another answer would be, your own comfort level. And we must know our singers. Something that I will do is I have a list of priorities for every rehearsal. So even if I hear something wrong, if it's not on my list of priorities, I may ignore it that day. If it's something really bad, something that I might do is, okay, I'll make a note to myself and I'll incorporate it into the next rehearsal. And then also I might call or email that individual. So instead of in front of everyone, and just let them know, oh, I think I heard this problem. One thing that as conductors, we still are responsible to lead the rehearsal. So even if someone makes a mistake, I don't want their mistake to control the entire rehearsal. So I get to decide whether or not, I fix it in that moment and how.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Of course. Other questions? Have any of you had the same problem? When Arga was talking, I saw some of you kind of nodding your heads. me see. I think Alex mentioned that it's very late there, isn't it? Is it after midnight?
Yes, sir.
So I think everyone must be very tired right now.
So okay, sir, because I'm a night person also.
Okay, very good. Well, are there any other questions or thoughts? All right, that is not a problem at all. So something that I want to do is make sure that you have my contact information. So I've just in the chat put my email address. Please feel free, after this session, if you have other questions or thoughts about my session, please feel free to contact me, reach out. You can also find me on Facebook or Instagram. I think Instagram, this is me. But it's very easy to connect with me on social media as well, and we can have a conversation there also. Okay? Well, listen, I just want to thank all of you, first of all, for being here, but also to congratulate you. I was so impressed with the performances that I was able to watch. And, this is, the performances were at a high level for any competition around the world. So for me, it just I felt like it was a great honor to be a jury member for this competition. So thank you all for your hard work. Really, it really was a pleasure. Okay, so I think with that said, we'll say good night. How does that sound?
Good night in Indonesia.
Yeah,
Selamat
good night.
malam. Selamat malam.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Teacher Harper.
Of course.
Thank you, sir, DJ.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Bye, good night.
Record